selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natur Singh. Part 11. Our committee did not receive the lion treatment. We were too insignificant. At our audience, the emperor walked in with two chihuahuas who hardly noticed the lowly diplomats. These tiny quadrupeds were treated with much deference by the emperor's staff. We were made to stand in alphabetical order. His Majesty said a few words in Amharic and withdrew. Kifil Wadajo, the Ethiopian delegate in the committee, almost crawled while approaching his emperor. He walked backwards, bowing without looking at the emperor. It was quite an experience for our Western friends. Even in 1962, all traffic stopped when the emperor was on his way to a function. My driver stopped the car, got out, and lay down flat on the ground, as did all others in the vicinity. The committee then proceeded to Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania. Julius Nyerere was then heading the government of the newly independent country. He was, by any standards, a man of consequence. While an eloquent speaker, he was somewhat tautological. He had been a schoolmaster at one time. A committed socialist, Nyerere possessed all the qualities needed for him to become an African statesman. Several petitioners from southern and Zimbabwe, Malawi, Lesotho, Botswana, Zanzibar, Mozambique, Southwest Africa and Angola appeared before the committee in the Tanzanian capital. None had been permitted by the colonial powers to travel to New York. The stories of the miseries inflicted on them by the whites were heart-rending. Jayaprakash Narayan, in suit and tie, also appeared before the committee. One incident in Dar es Salaam has remained in my memory. For a minor stomach upset, I was advised to go to the main hospital. The nurse who attended me was a foolish English woman. Her manners matched her accent. "You there, what is wrong with you?" she bleated. I told her off. Sheepishly, she apologized. Tanzania was no longer a colony, but the colonial order had not dissipated. I returned to New York via Athens, Rome, Geneva, and London. Except for London, I was seeing these cities for the first time. My African journey made me even more critical of the colonial powers. Whites, who in their respective countries would have been porters and petty traders, lived in Africa like pashas. Their treatment of Africans was so appalling, it almost made me sick. In Africa, Their behavior was shameful. What was extraordinary was that even in 1962, the British were justifying their policies of oppression from Fiji to Mauritius, from Trinidad and Tobago to Rhodesia. They were lecturing us on human rights, having paid no heed to them for 300 years. I constantly crossed verbal swords with the British delegates on the committee. In one of my speeches, I quoted Bernard Shaw. There is nothing so bad or so good that you will not find Englishmen doing it. But you will never find an Englishman in the wrong side. He does everything on principle. He fights you on patriotic principles. He robs you on business principles. He bullies you on manly principles. He supports his king on royal principles and cuts off his king's head on republican principles. His watchword is always duty. In the first week of October 1962, C. Rajagopalachari, that is Rajaji, arrived in New York. He was heading the Gandhi Peace Foundation delegation, which was to press for a total ban on nuclear tests. The ambassador to the United Nations was B.N. Chakravarti. He had been Rajaji's private secretary when Rajaji was governor of West Bengal, that is 15 years ago. Rajaji should have stayed with Chakravarti, who had recently taken up his new assignment. However, since Chakravarti was then living in a hotel, he asked me if I could accommodate Rajaji in my apartment, which I willingly agreed to. Rajaji spent nearly 5 days in New York. This was his first visit outside India, with the exception of Ceylon. I saw much of Rajaji at close quarters, and what I saw I liked. His lifestyle resembled that of a rishi. He never put on an act. His manners were impeccable and his speech gentle and soft. He was never condescending or patronizing. Like Nehru, he was always punctual. I asked him to write his autobiography or dictate his reminiscences. He had played such an active, at times decisive role in recent Indian history. He owed it to the nation to leave behind an account. I reminded him that Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru had written their autobiographies. He said he really did not have enough time. I told him that he would have had plenty of time when he was Governor General. With a smile on his face, he said he spent much of his time patching up the quarrels between the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. Another day, we discussed the partition of India. To provoke him, I said Lord Mountbatten sold partition to Nehru and Sardar Patel. Rajaji replied, "Let me tell you, Natwar Singh, I sold partition to Mountbatten. The Attlee government had already made up its mind to transfer power, but did not know how to go about it. Mountbatten had asked Rajaji how to break the impasse. He said partition was the only solution. I said that Gandhiji had been against partition. Why had he suddenly given in? This had come as a great shock even to my teenage self. Rajaji said Gandhiji had been aware of what was going on in the minds of Pandit Nehru and Patel and other members of the working committee. Only Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Jay Prakash Narayan had been against partition. Gandhi had been very disillusioned. He left Delhi for Calcutta before 15th August. His dream of united India lay shattered. Rajaji suffered from asthma. During his first imprisonment in 1921, he was locked up in a cell from 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. There was no electricity, the cell was full of mosquitoes, and the humidity aggravated his asthma. I was taken aback when he told me he had thought of committing suicide. In those days, medicines were not available in India for curing ailments. It was only by following a very strict diet and by relying on his enormous willpower that he got over his affliction. The only time I had an argument with him was about Goa. Rajaji strongly condemned our action of sending in troops to liberate Goa. I vigorously defended the government's decision, but he did not hold it against me. A stream of people came to meet Rajaji in New York. The first was Vincent Sheen, the author of Lead Kindly Light, a biography of Gandhi. Sheen claimed that he had asked Pandit Nehru to send Rajaji as ambassador to Washington. Rajaji felt he was not cut out for the post. It was many years later that I came across the letters that Sheen had exchanged with Pandit Nehru discussing the matter. From them, it became clear that his appointment as ambassador to Washington had been seriously considered. It was also clear that Rajaji would have been a complete misfit as an ambassador. The other people Rajaji met during his sojourn was Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atom bomb, and Louis Fisher, the author of a biography of Mahatma Gandhi. He had stayed with Mahatma at Wardha in 1942 and his book became a bestseller. Norman Cousins, editor of the influential weekly magazine Saturday Review, the advocate of world peace, Hugh Thant, Adlai Stevenson, and Sir Muhammad Jafarullah Khan, whom he had known before partition, also visited. From New York, Rajaji went to Washington to meet President Kennedy. Kennedy had been briefed about Rajaji's mission. From all accounts, Rajaji's advocacy was lucid and to the point. The president said he agreed in principle with Rajaji, but there existed serious problems. The US could not unilaterally stop nuclear tests. The USSR too must stop testing. How far Rajaji influenced Kennedy is not known. Before leaving New York, Rajaji gave me his book, The Voice of the Uninvolved. In it, he wrote, "As a memento of the happy days I spent in your apartment in New York and in grateful memory of your hospitality and help. I was ambassador to Poland when the news of his death reached me on 26 December 1972. He was 94 years old. I felt sad. It had been such a pleasure and privilege to know him, to correspond with him, to discuss books, authors, and politics. I acquired wisdom rather slowly. Some of it I definitely imbibed from Rajaji. Thank you very much. The committee then proceeded to Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania. Julius Nyerere was then heading the government of the newly independent country. He was, by any standards, a man of consequence. Man of consequence means important or valuable. While an eloquent speaker, he was somewhat tautological. He had been a schoolmaster at one time. Tautological. Tautological means needlessly repetitive without adding information or clarity. One incident in Dar es Salaam has remained in my memory. For a minor stomach upset, I was advised to go to the main hospital. The nurse who attended me was a foolish English woman. Her manners matched her accent. "You there, what is wrong with you?" she bleated. I told her off. BLEAT, bleat means speak in a querulous way. Tell someone off means to speak angrily to someone because they have done something wrong. Sheepishly, she apologized. Tanzania was no longer a colony, but the colonial order had not dissipated. DISSIPAT, dissipate means disappear. I constantly crossed verbal swords with the British delegates on the committee. Cross verbal swords means to have an argument with someone. Thank you very much.